Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a disturbing nature.
And we're not going to hold back on the graphic details and disturbing content.
So we do not recommend our podcast for children under the age of 13.
And while we respect the victims and their families involved in these tragic cases,
we're also going to be critical of mistakes that are made during the investigations.
And we're going to use dark humor to express ourselves now and then.
So with that said, this podcast may not be for everyone.
And that's okay. We're glad you're here checking us out.
And if you've made it this far, welcome to the Unsung Murder Ballads family. And follow us on Instagram at Unsung Murder Ballads if you want to talk to us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Unsung Murder Ballads. This is episode 123. I am Janice Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
Okay, so this week we have, we're coming back to the U.S. We kind of spent some time abroad for a few weeks there. So we're going to come back and we're going down to the grand old state of Mississippi.
Ooh, lovely.
Ooh, and what era, what time period are we talking today?
We're talking 2014, so not that long ago.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, we're talking recent. Okay.
It's funny that you say that because that's still like 11 years ago, and it feels a lot less, like it feels more recent than 11 years.
It does. It always does.
It really
Yeah,
does.
when somebody says 10 years ago, where does your mind go?
1995.
Oh, yeah, 1995.
So,
yeah.
Right, so here's
I'm 10 years old.
Yeah, so here's a funny...
I'm 0 years old.
I was going to say, wasn't that the year you were born?
I was just born.
So funny story, and I'm early. We're giving you an early tangent just because this happened at work, and it was so funny. This girl I work with bought a Kiss T-shirt, knowing that it was gonna like make me smile because I used to be a huge Kiss fan. I mean, I have Kiss tattoos, so I guess I still am a Kiss fan. But so she comes in with it, and she's showing it to me, and initially I was like, "Oh, that's cool," but then I take a quick like double take. And on the image is the band, which I'll get into and I'll go into more detail in a second. But it says 1996 on it.
Huh.
I go, does that say 1996? And she goes, yeah, isn't that the year they got together? I'm like, absolutely not. And she's like, what do you mean? I go, they got together in 1973. And now that I'm staring at your T-shirt, I realize it says 1996, which is when the original band got back together after breaking up. But the people on the image are not the original members of the band. And I'm like, that's the line.
So funny.
I was like, that's the lineup from 2010, and the costumes from 2010. I was like, your T-shirt's pissing me off.
That's so funny. It like must have been AI generated crap.
She goes, that's what she said. She goes, fucking Walmart.
Yup.
But it was so funny
because
what
happens when people try to make you happy.
Well, I was like, and I was joking with her, and I'm like, I get it that you saw Kiss. You thought, oh, Janice will like this shirt, but like, what the fuck? It just made me so annoyed. But anyway, I had to share that because that's just
you get
goofy.
the satisfaction of getting to be a corrector.
I guess so, but it was just like so annoying. Like whoever put that shirt together, and you said maybe it was AI generated, but it was just annoying. Like that was so like, and they couldn't have gotten anything any more incorrect. Almost like someone was trolling Kiss fans.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's funny. All right, so let's dive into the teaser here, which is quite the teaser. I'm pushing you guys in the deep end on this one.
All right, we're teasing.
Okay.
Let's rock.
Go.
Okay, so around 5 p.m. on December 6, 2014, firefighters responded to a call about a burning vehicle on Heron Road in Cortland, Mississippi. They got there and began the usual operation of extinguishing a car fire until something unthinkable happened. Walking towards them from the direction of the woods was a young woman in just her underwear, seriously burned beyond recognition.
Oh.
Ooh, no, that can't be normal.
Help me, she said to then Fire Chief Cole Haley. Multiple firefighters would later testify that they asked her who did this to you, and that the woman replied either Eric or Derek. It is unclear exactly what she said, as her burns had kind of closed her throat, and her lips and tongue they were already parched from inhaling smoke, fire, and gasoline fumes.
Woof.
However, in the ambulance, another first responder asked her, "Did Eric do this to you?" And according to this person's court testimony, the woman replied to him, "No." So a doctor would
probably Derek?
So the doctor would later testify that it was not possible for her to have made anything articulate or distinguishable at that point due to her injuries.
Hmm.
The mystery of what she was trying to say, if anything, has a massive impact on this case. And this is the case of Jessica Chambers. So yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, I told you, pushing you right in the deep end. So Jessica was born on February 2nd, 1995, to Ben and Lisa Chambers. Jessica's mother was a nurse while her father was a mechanic. Now, Ben, her father, had some trouble with drugs early in Jessica's life, and he was arrested and spent time in prison at some point. But when he came out, he turned his life around and he got a job as a mechanic for, of all places, the sheriff's department.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's
Truly, of all places.
I was going to say, that's a guy who's like, I'm going to prove I'm turning my life around.
Yeah, truly.
So Ben and Lisa separated when Jessica was pretty young, but they remained a close family, and they were all living in Cortland, Mississippi. Now understand, this is a very small town, and it's about 60 miles south of Memphis, Tennessee. Jessica was an athlete in high school, and she was loved by almost everybody. She was described as outgoing and just got along with, most people. Now again, her parents separated when she was small, but Jessica had a total of 5 brothers and sisters on both sides.
Holy crap.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. Tragedy struck her family when her older brother was killed in his late 20s in a car accident. And sadly, after this event, Jessica had trouble coping, and she became involved with some questionable individuals and started experimenting with drugs for a period while in high school. Despite all of that, Jessica graduated from high school in 2013 and began working at a clothing store while she was trying to decide whether or not she wanted to go to college or whatever she wanted to do next. She was interested in a couple of areas of study. She was looking at possibly writing, teaching, maybe nursing. And on December 6, 2014, Jessica was spending the day with her friend Keisha, and they were driving around as teenagers do in a small town. They made a stop to pick up a guy named Quentin Tellis. Now, according to Keisha, they smoked some weed, and they dropped Quentin off around noontime that day. And then Jessica dropped Keisha off at her home at 2 p.m. and went home. Now, Jessica got a call around 4:25 that day, and she told her mother that she was running to a convenience store called the M&M and that she would be back soon. An M&M gas station is a convenience store. Basically, in this small town, it's where everybody goes. It's like one of those few intersections with shit to do in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So based on surveillance there, the things we know for a fact is that she arrived at 5:20. The security footage shows her arriving, and as she's about to enter the station, someone off camera gets her attention, and she stops, changes direction, and walks out of frame. She then returns into the frame. She goes inside. She speaks with the clerk and buys a few things, makes a quick phone call, goes out to her car, and gasses her car up. About an hour and a half later, at 6:48 p.m., Jessica called her mother to say that she would be back in a little bit. So it's already been an hour and 20-something minutes since she was on that camera. Then, around 8 p.m., 2 men driving down a rural road spotted a car on fire on the side of the road. They called 911 immediately, and within 2 minutes, the fire department arrived. Now, again, based on the teaser I hit you with just a few minutes ago, you know that they found something far worse than a burning car. Jessica was burned from head to toe and walked slowly towards them with her clothes mostly burned away.
Ooh.
Apparently, the only thing that she was wearing was her underwear at the time, and she kept saying, "Help me, help me." Her whole body was blackened, and she was just unrecognizable.
Oh.
First,
Something out of a horror movie.
it's crazy. Honestly, if I saw it in a horror movie, I probably wouldn't have believed it. Anyone was capable of doing that. First responders covered her, with a blanket, and she collapsed to the ground, and they asked who she was. One man that was at the scene seemed to understand what she was saying and realized that he knew her. Now, Jessica was in such bad shape that she had to be airlifted from the scene to a Memphis hospital that had a burn unit. Jessica's mother was informed of her daughter's situation, and Lisa drove the 60 miles to Memphis where the devastating truth of what Jessica's case actually was became clear to her. Lisa obviously couldn't have guessed how bad it was going to be until she got there. Now, just imagine that. Like, you get a call and you're told your kid is, has been burned in a fire and you had to get to the hospital. I don't think you could possibly imagine it would be that bad.
Yeah, you can't prepare yourself for that.
Jessica had burns over 96% of her body.
Oh, God.
And there was basically no hope for survival.
Yeah,
no.
you can't lose that much of your skin. Oh, that's so awful.
Her pain was so excruciating that there was little the doctors could do. And her mother, Lisa, spent her final moments with her daughter telling her that if living was too painful, she should just go ahead and let go.
Oh.
And that's exactly what Jessica did, passing away from her burns early in the morning of December 7th with her mother present, which is crazy.
Oh.
So the police and investigators immediately call the FBI and the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. And the first place they begin investigating, of course, is the crime scene. Outside of the burned car, detectives discovered Jessica's cell phone as well as a piece or two of her bra. I don't know why reports had that, and they had always said a piece or two. And I'm like, okay. They found her bra.
Right.
Right.
Now,
Weird.
Jessica's car keys would be found by a different person that was walking with his child on the side of the road a quarter of a mile away from the scene. Now, these items, along with Jessica's car, were sent to a lab for an arson investigation to see what other evidence they could collect. The team also began to look into their one clue at this point, and that was the name Eric or Derek. Soon, they were interviewing Jessica's friends, Keisha and Quentin Tellis, and because they were the last person to see her that day, other than her mother. Keisha told police how she had been driving around with Jessica and that they were smoking marijuana for a bit. And when they interviewed Quentin, he verified all those details, adding that Jessica had dropped him off before noon and that was the last time he had seen her. Quentin had other information, though, pointing detectives to a man named Derek Holmes, who was also a registered sex offender.
Yikes.
Derek was brought in for questioning, and when asked for his alibi, he said that he had spent that night inside his house with his mother. So, super strong alibi.
Yeah, that sounds convincing.
They interviewed other members of his family, though, and neighbors, and they were all able to essentially confirm that he was actually home that night.
Wow.
Now, while they were pretty sure he wasn't the Derek that they were looking for, they did continue to follow up on other Erics and Dereks in the area, but things kept coming up empty. But they were also working other angles, and they were about to get a pretty big break. The evidence that went to the arson lab came back, and Jessica's phone was analyzed. First, there was no Eric or Derek in her contacts at all. No messages, nothing like that. Now, there was a man that she was messaging whose number she hadn't yet saved on her phone. Now, again, it's clear she had recently met him. They can tell that, because he's not saved. But those messages, very quickly as they went through them, they went from kind of hi, how are you, to strong sexual overtones.
Oh, boy.
Now, based on the text, it was real obvious that Jessica wasn't really reciprocating those overtures.
Oof.
It seemed like she was kind of dismissing them and taking them as a joke. She was obviously, Joyous, you would know better than we would. You handle it in a way to not hurt feelings or make people angry.
Right. You try to deflect carefully.
But there was a recent exchange that became even more interesting to law enforcement because this unidentified man's phone number was the one that she had called on the camera footage from the M&M gas station.
Ooh.
Hmm.
Okay.
After some digging, police were able to learn who that number belonged to. It was Quentin Tellis. You know the guy she was driving around with Keisha all day?
Yeah.
So armed with this information, the FBI went and spoke to Quentin for a second time. And of course, Tellis changes his story. This time, he says that he and Jessica had a sexual encounter one time before in her car, behind his house one night. He goes further and describes how, when they were having sex in her car, that they had needed to push the seat all the way back to make space for the two of them in the front seat to be able to do the deed.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
as police are listening to this, they're paying attention because when they analyzed her car, from the fire, the seat was pushed all the way back. And what they're thinking that maybe someone wasn't having sex that time, but maybe somebody taller than she was driving her car. So they're exactly. They're looking at this thinking maybe this guy is trying to set up his own alibi here.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So police officers asked Tellis if they had had a sexual encounter the evening of Jessica's death. And he says no, it had happened the week before. So they're kind of thinking to themselves, well, is she really going to drive around for an entire week with her seat not put back in the right position?
Are we talking about the driver's seat?
Yeah, we're talking the front seats, yeah.
Okay, you're not going to be driving around like that. That's weird.
Right. The only thing, let's play devil's advocate. The only thing I can come up with here is maybe the seat was stuck in that position and she had no choice but to sit up on the edge of it. But I don't buy that.
That's weak.
But wouldn't the guy have known that because he was just in the car?
One would assume, yeah. So he did admit to talking to her around 5 p.m. that night, but claimed that he was in another town. However, when detectives went through his phone, it was clear that he had deleted Jessica's contact information and all of the text messages.
Weird.
So when they asked him why he had done that, he said it was because he knew she was dead, so he didn't need that information anymore.
What?
That's kind of weird thing to say, bro.
Right? I mean,
a lot better excuses if you're making excuses.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like when a friend of mine died years ago, it wasn't that long after that I deleted him out of my phone because I'm never going to call him again. But you don't do it. I would assume you don't do it that quickly after, especially under these circumstances.
Yeah.
So the police were obviously really interested in continuing to investigate Tellis. Now, looking into his claims of not being in town that night at the time of her attack, they verified that he had bought a prepaid debit card in the nearby town of Batesville, which was only 10 or 15 minutes away. He bought that card at 8:26 p.m., so about 20 minutes after the 911 call came in. So
weird.
Doesn't provide him any solid alibi here. So while Quentin Tellis seems like a good suspect, there really wasn't enough evidence to prove he had done anything or had anything to do with assaulting Jessica or setting her car on fire or her on fire at this point. And police continued to look into other leads as well. Now, Jessica had a boyfriend that was named Travis Sanford. He had known gang connections. And at the time of Jessica's death, he was incarcerated on burglary charges. Now, they were looking into him.
You get incarcerated on burglary charges?
Yeah, you can go to prison for burglary.
Oh.
Guess it
Why
depends.
did I think how many people we hear who don't go to prison and I'm like, you can go for fucking stealing some shit? Are you shitting me?
But again, I want to make it clear. Jessica is a young white woman, and both her boyfriend and Tellis here are young black men. So I think that might
does
and
enumerate it a little bit,
and
how one could get incarcerated for that.
Exactly. And I'm not picking on Mississippi, but I'm picking on Mississippi.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Facts are facts.
Yeah. So that's probably why he's in prison for burglary. They were looking into him because it was also known that he was a very jealous type of guy, and detectives wanted to see that if while he was incarcerated, he could have possibly have known that maybe Jessica wasn't being faithful and had some involvement with people. Maybe he encouraged people outside of prison to do something about maybe her infidelities.
Could be.
So they started looking at that angle pretty hard, but they couldn't find any connection to her murder and any gang activity. So they're pretty sure it's not him. And plus, for what it's worth, when they told her boyfriend Travis about her death, he did seem devastated, and they truly believed that he was shocked and surprised. Now,
Okay, so a genuine reaction goes a long way, I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, he's in prison, so obviously they're the first ones to tell him. So I'm sure, yeah, you'd get a good idea from that, I would think. Now, several months go by, and police didn't have any direct leads, and the case was kind of hitting a wall. So they went back and they re-examined the phone data. Now, they always had Jessica's phone, but now they had Quentin Tellis's phone as well. And lo and behold, law enforcement were able to see that both Tellis and Jessica's phones put them in the same location after 6 p.m. on the day she died.
So, and this is after she's supposed to have dropped him off.
Correct. Now, Tellis had said he didn't see Jessica after noontime that day, after she dropped him off. But now the cell phone is saying that they were in the same place. So they bring Tellis in for a third interview. At this time, actually, he's in jail for a connection to a different burglary charge. So he's been arrested for burglary. So they don't have to go far to question him. So he was cooperative, and he listened to the new information that police were telling him, about the cell phones. And as one would expect, his story changes again.
Who would have thought?
Right?
Always happens like that, doesn't it?
So Tellis then states that he was with a friend named Big Mike in the town of Batesville. And while they were out there, he saw Jessica in her own car. But, he wasn't out with her. She was just randomly in the same place. And
This guy's an idiot and he's guilty. I'm saying it now.
According to Tellis, he then went back to his house with his friend Big Mike. Mike dropped him off and he stayed at home for a little while, but right around 8 o'clock, he decided to go back out to the town of Batesville where he purchased that prepaid debit card. So police, they go and find Big Mike.
As they should.
And you know what Big Mike has to say?
He has to say, I didn't see that guy that day.
Nope, he was not with Quentin Tellis at all that evening. In fact, he was up in Nashville watching a Titans game, and he even took his own truck. So he's basically preempting it so that if Quentin Tellis tries to say that he had his truck or some bullshit, that's a lie too. So
Damn, this guy's not having his friends back. That's telling.
Yeah, Big Mike is like, fuck this. I ain't going down for you, whatever you did.
Yup.
So the police return to Tellis and they're like, hey, I'm sure you can guess what happens next. They're like, we found out you weren't telling us the truth. So,
tell us
right?
the truth.
That's funny.
Quick, plead insanity.
Well, I'm sure you can guess what's going to happen next. Quentin Tellis changes his story one more time.
Oh my goodness gracious.
I know, right? Like when you're caught that many times in a lie, you might as well just stop playing. Like stop the games.
Yeah, truly. Give it up, bud.
So this time he says he was with Jessica that evening. That they had gone out to Batesville together to eat at Taco Bell around 6 o'clock.
Oh, is that so?
After that, they returned to his house where they smoked some marijuana in her car, and she left around 7 p.m.
After the 911 call?
No, the 911 call comes in around 8.
Oh, gotcha.
Yep. So the circumstantial evidence against him is mounting, and police felt that they were ready to make their move. So in February of 2016, literally about 14 months after Jessica's death, Quentin Tellis was indicted for the murder of Jessica Chambers. So a quick history lesson on Quentin Tellis. He had a criminal history of burglary, and after receiving a 5-year sentence, he was released after only 1 year.
Oh, come on.
Well, I mean, for burglary,
right.
I'm not going to say that that's the most unreasonable thing.
No, and I
That's
agree.
not a violent crime.
It's not a violent crime. Someone maybe lost some money in it, but it's not terrible. I agree with you. He was then caught again, same crime, and this time he was sentenced to 8 years and released after only 2 in 2014, the same year Jessica was killed. After Tellis's arrest, Jessica's family was happy that there was finally an arrest that was made. But a lot of people in the town, they weren't so sure. This is a small town in Mississippi, so most people kind of know each other. And the situation at hand right now is you have a murdered white woman and a black man going to trial based on circumstantial evidence. So it did create quite the little bit of drama in that town.
I'm sure it did.
So in October of 2017, the trial against Quentin Tellis began, and it was a packed courtroom. Literally, the media made a sensation out of it, as they do.
As they do.
Now, the prosecution called the EMT who saw Jessica first that night as their first witness, and he described the awful scene and Jessica's cry for help and how unrecognizable she was. This person literally cried on the stand as he describes sitting there holding her hand and laying her down on the ground and just being with her.
Oh, that's really sad.
It was obvious to everyone that this man was emotionally scarred by what he saw that night.
And that's an EMT, and they see shit.
Exactly. But it was also pretty clear that the prosecution was going for the emotional route in their case. Because when you have a lot of circumstantial evidence and not a lot of physical evidence, you kind of have to play on the heartstrings a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So the Eric and Derek argument came up during the trial, but as Quentin Tellis is neither of those names, it didn't help in any way with the prosecution, but the defense really made sure that they kind of hammered that home. But I have to say, and this is just a personal observation on my part, for someone with a damaged throat or larynx or whatever may have been damaged, saying Derek might sound like Tellis. Just saying.
There's a plausible.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe. I mean, again, it depends on the damage, and who the hell knows what those EMTs and first responders first really heard. But I can see,
Right.
I mean, unless you know the name Tellis, you're not going to think she's saying Tellis.
Right, like when you hear a name that you've never heard for the first time, and you're like, "What?" And it takes like 5 times to recognize it.
Right, but you might be like, did she just say Derek or Eric? Like, Tellis? You know what I mean? It's not
Mhm.
exact, but we don't know how injured she was. We don't know what was really coming out of her mouth. So there was also Jessica's car keys that were found a quarter of a mile down the road. There was DNA found on those keys.
Oh shit.
The DNA expert found that there were 4 male contributors to the DNA on her car keys.
Wow.
Lord, that's a lot of DNA.
I mean, it's transfer DNA, so who knows? You know, maybe, I mean, she is one of many siblings, you know?
True, and friends who could be driving her car.
Exactly. Now, Jessica's DNA was obviously on it, but so was Quentin Tellis's DNA. He was one of the 4 male samples. The defense argued that since he was in the car, it wasn't all that odd, and certainly didn't indicate that he murdered anybody.
Right.
Plus, they would kind of point out who were the other male DNA contributors. Maybe we should be looking into them. You know, they're playing that game.
And they're right. I mean, yes, we should look into all the contributors.
Agreed. Now, it should be noted that Tellis's attorney, Darla Palmer, was a very skilled defense attorney. She was able to show that Jessica had some questionable associations and had been involved with, or, you know, probably people that weren't in a great crowd. Her boyfriend that was in prison was in a gang and was in there for burglary. There was also...
Right, it seems like all of her boyfriends have been in prison.
Right. So she's not making all the best decisions either. So they're playing that game. And this defense lawyer also planted the seed of reasonable doubt, suggesting that there were other possible suspects that the police just weren't looking into. One of the people that the police did bring in was a burn specialist who talked about how Jessica's injuries were so substantial and so severe that they would have made speaking very difficult and possibly even impossible for her to have spoken anything. So they're tearing apart this Eric Derek argument.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecution's strongest evidence was the cell phone records, as well as Tellis's changing stories. Now, evidence showed that Tellis and Jessica's phones were traveling together between 6 and 8 p.m. Investigators plotted the data points on the map and that showed between 6:30 and 7:30 in particular, the pings from Jessica's cell phone and Quentin Tellis's cell phone were identical. They were bouncing off the same towers. Now, to reveal something that I have purposely been withholding from you guys.
How dare you?
Remember when I was telling you about the camera footage at the M&M gas station where she was walking in and then she stops, waves to someone, and walks off the camera frame?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Turns out Quentin Tellis lived across the street from that gas station.
Oh, come on.
So one of the surveillance cameras was pointed directly at the front of Tellis's house.
Wow.
Wow, that's perfect, isn't it?
And it showed that at 7:26 p.m., a vehicle was seen leaving his home. At the same time, Jessica's phone is moving to the spot where she would ultimately be found. So her phone is moving, and there's a vehicle moving from Tellis's house at 7:26.
Would you look at that?
Surveillance also showed that the vehicle returned to Quinton's house and drove to a shed on the property at around 7:50 p.m. Now, in that shed were cans of gasoline.
Oh, come on, smoking gun.
After that, it left and headed back in the direction where Jessica was later found. And it was 10 minutes later, after the vehicle had returned to Tellis's property one more time, that Jessica was discovered on fire. Watching the video footage, you could not tell what type of car it was or who the driver was because it really was in the distance and you can only do so much with pixels. So the prosecution was arguing that Tellis thought he had killed Jessica, or at the very least severely harmed her on his property, and that, maybe they had an altercation of some kind, and then he drove her to that site not far from his house, but had to go back for the gasoline. He returned to the crime scene, set her on fire to get rid of any evidence, and then returned home, which is really pretty much what I just described on the camera footage.
Yeah.
Well, his lawyer, Darla Palmer, attacked that data, saying that it wasn't exactly as precise as the prosecution argued. That she can't argue what they saw on the camera, but you can't really see much on the camera, according to her. But she pointed out that in that small town, there weren't that many cell phone towers. And they were all so spread out that pretty much she was arguing that because there were so few, that almost everyone in town were probably pinging off the same towers at the same time. So she makes this really intense argument that that's not proof that they were necessarily moving together. So, one day after closing arguments, the jury came back with a verdict. When the judge asked if the verdict was unanimous, one juror shouted out no, which was not standard.
That's not normal, yeah.
That's very different.
So the judge sends them back in to discuss things further, and they come back out 30 minutes later. This time, when they return, they said they found Tellis not guilty.
Wow.
Whoa.
So when the judge polls the jurors, some of them say they do think he's guilty. So it seems that they didn't come to this unanimous decision and didn't understand the judge's instructions. So he explains it to them, and he sends them back out again. After deliberating for another hour, they come back to the courtroom, and they say that they cannot come up with a unanimous vote, and the case ends in a mistrial.
Holy crap.
Wow.
Now, the prosecution was determined to try Tellis a second time, and 1 year later, they did it again. The key difference this time was that the prosecution presented doctors and specialists. They had a doctor who also reported that even though it was hard to determine Jessica's injuries, they were able to find bruising on her chest, which suggested that she had been assaulted in some way before being set on fire. Despite this new evidence, the jury still couldn't come to a unanimous decision, and it was a second mistrial.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Prosecutors have not yet pushed for a third trial, but that doesn't mean they are finished with Quinton Tellis. And here's why. Not quite 1 year after Jessica's murder, but before Tellis's first trial had even started, a woman by the name of Min Chen Hassao, also known to her friends as Mandy, she was an exchange student living in Louisiana. She was found brutally stabbed in her apartment where she lived. Police searched Mandy's apartment and found a receipt from a local Walmart time-stamped the day before her murder. They got the surveillance, and it showed Mandy had gone into the Walmart by herself, but when she came out, she got into a black Chevy Impala with a young black male driving. So when police went and tracked down that vehicle, take a guess who it was registered to.
Quentin.
No, not Tellis.
Quinton Tellis. So police checked Mandy's bank account records and found that someone had used her debit card after she was murdered. Anyone want to take
Whoa.
How stupid can you be,
a guess at who was using the card?
Quentin?
And just like Jessica's case, there was no physical evidence to tie Tellis to Mandy's actual murder. However, an anonymous tipster came forward and told police that someone he knew had been bragging about torturing Mandy to get her PIN number. This person said that she gave up the PIN number, then he murdered her, stabbing her over 20 times. Do you want to take a guess at who this
Whoa.
person is? 3 for 3?
Quentin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So not only was Quentin charged with Jessica Chambers' murder, but he was also charged with Mandy's murder. And after his second mistrial for Jessica's case, Quentin was extradited to Louisiana, where he pled not guilty to Mandy's murder. Law enforcement may not have had at this point an airtight case for her stabbing, but they did have plenty of evidence to show that Tellis had burglarized Mandy's bank account. If you remember,
Oh, interesting that's burglary.
that's what they're considering it. Weird, right? And
Yeah, I never knew that.
I think they did that on purpose because he has a series of past convictions for burglary, and it's repeat offense, so they can stack on time.
Oh,
That makes
that's
sense.
smart.
Yep. So the prosecution attempted to get a plea in this case. They wanted Quentin Tellis in prison. They made him a plea deal, and he decided to take it. So he pled guilty in 2016 of the illegal use of Mandy's debit card, as well as drug charges that were also connected. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison because he was sentenced as a habitual offender, which that's not enough, in my opinion.
Not at all. No way.
No.
But my thoughts on this are, I think they were going for what they could get, because now he's in prison and they have 10 years to gather the evidence they need in both Mandy's case and Jessica's case.
That's true. And in the meantime, if they're pretty convinced that he's killing people, then they can make sure he's not killing any more
Exactly.
people in that meantime, which is always what we're begging.
Exactly. Now, sadly, Jessica's mother, Lisa, died in 2021, having never seen any justice for her daughter, Jessica. And that is the case of Jessica Chambers.
Holy hell.
It's a little different. I wanted to throw a curveball in there after some of the brutal cases. Not that the horror of this case wasn't brutal, but I didn't want it to be a standard, we have a certain system in place, and I wanted to throw a curveball at you guys. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that one's fucked up. I can't imagine being that EMT seeing that.
Yeah, that's pretty horrifying to come across.
Yeah, and it sucks that he wasn't held accountable, but like I said, it was all circumstantial. As good as the prosecutors were, I think that defense lawyer was just better.
Right. And it sounds like the defense lawyer was right that they really didn't have full evidence to prove it.
Right, exactly. It's all circumstantial, and that's the sucky part.
Yeah.
The fire destroyed too much evidence, which is what fire
Mhm.
does, That's why they do it. So,
Yeah,
See,
that's
it's
the
why
whole
they
point.
burn people.
Yep.
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, so that was not that these cases ever leave us feeling good, so I apologize for bringing it down, but at least it wasn't quite as bad as the last few.
Yeah, this one was.
He only managed to kill 2 people, which, I hate to have to say that, but
No, and there was no human trafficking or assaults involved. You know what I mean? That's some heavy stuff. Not that this isn't heavy, but it's not that heavy.
It's a little on the lighter side.
A little. We do have a fumbles coming up soon, I promise.
Oh, okay. All
we
right.
love a fumbles.
Yes. But so we'll wrap that up here. Thank you everyone for joining us. Once again, I am Janice Dead,
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
and we'll see you next week.
Bye.